Thanks so much for being on again. That was a fantastic conversation. I appreciate all of your time. I was only planning on having you on for 45 minutes to an hour. I hate that we went so long, but I appreciate your being so generous with your time.
Well, that's what you get for talking to a former mime. You know, when you get an opportunity to talk, you just don't shut up. You want to hear a cool story? I got to share this with you because you would really appreciate this.
Oh, please.
Yeah, I'm part of this group called Masters of Horror, and
Yes.
Mick Garris kind of put together all of us. So originally it was literally like the apostles at the Last Supper, some of the pictures, I mean, but it's like Rob Zombie, John Carpenter, Joe Dante, Wes Craven, Toby Hooper, John Landis, Bryan Singer. I mean, it was just these guy, and somehow I got in there, because of the Friday and my friendship with Mick and things. And then it just kept expanding and expanding and expanding until I think the last time, there's like 44 guys there, all the guys from Saw and all the more recent movies, and then going, all the way back. And suddenly, maybe like 4 years ago, both Quentin and Robert started coming to these things. And the first time Quentin came, and we were sitting at this table at this little place, he sat right next to me. And I was going, holy shit, this is great. And at one point he turned to me and he says, I got to tell you about this new movie that we're going to do. And he pitched me Grindhouse. And he pitched shit that he didn't do. I mean, and how the commercials, and he went into Death Proof, and he went into what Robert was going to do, and then at the end there was going to be a guy that was going to come out and introduce if you guys would like to stick around, we're going to have like a new Swedish movie. We're just going to be previewing it, and we hope you guys will hang in and watch this thing. And it's like this softcore Swedish movie that was supposed to be this ludicrous thing that was going to, I can't remember how he was going to end it, but it sort of got interrupted by the film breaking or something. I mean, he just had these incredibly crazy ideas, but the most amazing thing was to be 2 feet away from him and to feel his energy in pitching something. I was ready to take out my credit card and just give it to him and say, let me invest. I mean, you could really see why this guy is who he is, because his passion and his ability, to tell a story and tell a tale and reference other things and be right in your face and smiling, and you're smiling and nodding. I was just amazed. And then at the end of the night, everybody was saying goodbye and stuff. And I was leaving, and, and I see this, vintage car, that Quentin was driving, take off down the alley. And I went, shit. And I would have loved to just shake his hand, say goodbye again. And I'm walking towards my car, and then I hear this car back up, and and I turn around, and Quentin gets out of the car, and he comes over and he says, Tom, I just got to tell you, One Dark Night, Thorn, HBO, and he starts naming off cast. He starts naming off TV episodes I did, Date with an Angel. I mean, he was like a Rolodex of everything that I had done. And it's not because I'm anybody famous. It's because he's got a mind that's like that. He sees stuff, and then it's like, he's got this photographic, memory. And I was like, this? He goes, yeah, man, it was great. I love that your shit. Yeah, I couldn't leave without telling you. Gets back in the car and takes off. And of course, I was in hog heaven. I mean, I could not believe, Quentin actually knew my shit, But and he does that. I mean, when he talks about stuff, he just makes you feel like, you are an equal and you love this stuff as much as he does. It's infectious. It's just amazing. And Robert's very, very cool too. Much more chill, but also just very, he knows his stuff, and he's really, really, all these horror guys. It's amazing that everybody's, like a gentleman, really nice, really laid back. And of course the two energy guys are Quentin and John Landis. Those are the alpha dogs in the group. Yeah. Their voices pop through and above everybody else,
I was kind of amazed. I mean, I know that there was the Showtime show back in, was it 2005, 2006, Masters of Horror, but I would almost think it would be kind of amazing if somebody filmed the dinners and just the conversations and the back and forth, not in like a larger version of the Oh, was it the IFC John Favreau show? Was it Dinner for Five,
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that? But
yeah.
instead do like a Masters of Horror show. God, I would kill to be a fly on that wall. you know.
I know. I know everybody. It's like, yeah, I mean, you feel so lucky to be in that. And there was talks about that kind of thing, but I think everybody sort of felt like, well, this is sort of us celebrating us, and and people could be intimate, and those who drank, would drink, and there was, but I mean, there was a exchanging of, do you have this, DVD of this? Oh, you got to see this, and ideas. And the one cool thing which I got to share with you is one night we were all talking about stuff, and somebody stood up and said, okay, what is the definitive horror movie that everybody got to say that when they saw it, it was like, this is the most horrific thing they ever saw.
Oh, wow.
You're not going to believe what the consensus was out of everybody once somebody started to bring it up and everybody agreed. Passion of the Christ.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
And I mean, I would have never thought that, because, I'm going Exorcist, of course, but when that started to come up and you go, yeah, I mean, that was intense, and the beating and what Mel did with that thing. It's like, yeah, that was pretty horrific.
I remember, I was the big horror guy, and, at the theater when it came out, it wound up just being a small group of us of about 4 or 5 people. And I remember coming out of it feeling like I had been watching a horror film, like watching something like deeply upsetting and brutal, and just and what was so crazy is we actually sold out the first 2 weeks. I had never seen another movie do that, and all the time I was there, I worked there for 15 years, and every single showing, I believe it was 4 or 5 showings a day for 2 weeks solid, sold out well in advance. And but this was like church groups and people bringing their children, and you would just watch all of these people, from people in their 60s and 70s to young children that have been brought along for whatever reason, just walking out shell shocked and crying. And I can totally see that. I mean, we don't really count that movie as a horror flick, I don't think. But as far as being one of the more brutal films out there, I mean, especially to have played like 2,500, 3,000 screens, something like that, I can't think of another movie that dealt in that level of gore and brutality. And yet it sort of, I think, gets a pass because it is, because of the story that it tells.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. It's incredibly ballsy on his part, but I guess that's what that man is pretty much, feels nobody can stop him. And he certainly made some mistakes, but at the same time, my son just did a movie with him, the one that hasn't come out yet, where he's, I guess, a vigilante or something. I can't remember the name of it.
Is it Bloodfather or something like that?
Yes, that's okay. It. And I said, so what is he like? He said he was the greatest. He just, because my son's like a key PA, third assistant director. And he said, yeah, he treated us all really well. He was like funny and fun and, just a great guy, incredibly professional and stuff. And it's like, well, the image that, is put out there is, the drunk woman, woman beater, whatever. I mean, it's amazing how, people are who they are, and then unfortunately when their personal shit gets out there, it becomes a whole villain, and then suddenly they'll do something and everybody forgets all that. No, Michael Jackson never was with a child. No. It's like all forgotten about, quick, fast. But I was sort of, because I've always been a fan of his. I've always loved how he'd take those characters, way to the edge. Especially like with Lethal Weapon and stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And then his, just his own movies were always, risk taking.
Yeah, I think he's a hell of an artist. I mean, it's weird to talk about him and be sort of a fan with it being public knowledge. Some of his, the dodgier aspects of his personality. But it is, you can tell that, the man is an artist, and he, so he's wrestling with some demons. I would hope that somebody like that can find a way to move past that, or sort of, get help. And I wonder if, I mean, it's very cool that, it sounds like he was, a pleasure to work with. I wonder if he's taken steps in recent years to try and repair whatever it is that's perhaps, wrong with him in a way.
Yeah, could be. You hope, because the main thing is obviously trying to find some sort of serenity about life and who you are and where you're at, because it's a business that can really make you feel like you're invincible, and people do really act terrible at certain points in their career and then suddenly realize, I'm not as hot as I thought I was. But you're made to feel that with, managers, agents, lawyers, press, everything, you start to buy into this complete falsehood. And I've had so many actors that, I saw were such sweet, wonderful innocents in the, early days, and then suddenly become these egomaniacal guys or girls that just, like, you can't deal with them. I mean, they just, I was watching like the cast of Glee, just go from these wonderful, sweet, young, talented people to, no, I'm not coming out until she comes out, of her trailer, and all those games and craziness.
Oh, wow.
But it's, they're just, they're young and don't know, that it's, it takes a team, and, you're only as hot as you are at that moment, and it's going to go away. Nothing stays, there's going to constantly be that roller coaster.
Yeah, it is always interesting to watch that too, when there seems to be some sort of redemption, that the press covers whenever somebody has had past mistakes and they sort of pull themselves up by the bootstraps, or, try and repair their image as best they can. It's always kind of fascinating to watch. But, I'm maybe it's strange, but I always try my best not to let that affect my view of their work in a way. For so many actors who have had, really bad raps for their behavior. I mean, I shouldn't say any names, but I'm a complete horror nerd, and I try and make the rounds at like any horror convention that, comes around in the area. I actually met you at a horror convention at a Horror Hound a couple of years ago. And you were very nice to
Oh, did you?
Yeah, you were very nice to myself and my friend. But there was a convention that I went to, and I met an actress who was one of my heroes. She was in one of my favorite horror flicks ever, and it was kind of a big deal that she was there. And I met her, and she was just kind of terrible. And I was the entire time on the way back, it was about a 2.5, 3 hour long drive back home here. And I was like, God, what if this affects the movie? I was like, that will have been the worst thing ever. Like, I can handle having met her and her being kind of, awful, but what if I pop this movie in and it's forever ruined? Unfortunately, I actually watched it that night. I popped the Blu-ray in, and 10 minutes in, I'm in love with that character, and, I'm completely on her side. So, but that's always kind of a concern whenever I go to some conventions. There was a guy I met. He's kind of a makeup effects wizard who, I wanted to grow up and be that guy when I was like 12 years old. And then I met him in real life, and I was like, oh, I can't really possibly idolize this guy ever again. But fortunately, I mean, most of the people I've met at horror cons are just, lovely people, and everybody's usually super cool. And plus, those places are such great hangouts for, for just horror fans. I mean, every time I walk into one like a Horror Hound or, something sort of Monster Mania, I drove 9 hours away, it's, you just sort of walk into that main hall, and it's like, oh, God, I'm home.
Yeah. I know. I have that same feeling. I just love going, even if I'm not, involved in any aspect, just walking around and, looking at the stuff and just going, God, where was this when I was 8 years old? I would have just died, but I'm happy now looking at it. So it's not like, that big of a regret. I'm just sort of happy I can still feel 8, looking at it.
Me too. I'm such, even when there are some masks that are sort of super scary, or, when there's a little table set up with like a, kind of a torture porny horror flick that an indie filmmaker is trying to sell or something like that, I still feel like a kid. I still feel giddy around all of that stuff when I'm walking up and down the aisles and seeing so many people who are as in love with the genre as I am. So yeah, it's always a blast. I can't wait until the next one. I think the next Horror Hound is going to be in 2 or 3 weeks, I think. So yeah, I can't wait. I'm actually fortunate enough to, this will be the first, well, no, I guess the second con since, but I'm writing for the magazine version of Horror Hound now, which is kind of cool. And I can't wait to actually meet up with the guys who run the magazine and the con all together. Even though I fear I might take a lambasting a bit because I just turned in an article for them. It's a one pager where I and feel free to laugh because most people will. I completely understand, but I wrote a sort of in defense of piece for Blair Witch 2 because
Wow.
I genuinely dig that movie, and
Yeah.
I also understand that I am one of the few. So so I basically wrote a piece
Well,
explaining myself for they thought it would be fun to have sort of a Blair Witch article to coincide with the release of the new movie that comes out in mid-September, which is when the next magazine's going to hit. So I was like, I always wanted to write a defense of Blair Witch 2, and I basically got the okay, if you want to take the heat, go ahead and write it. But
yeah, I was fortunate that I saw Blair Witch at home, I had like a little private, I made my own little movie screen, with a, kind of a classic Stewart screen, silver screen in my living
oh
room,
wow,
and a projector and stuff. It took me till 50 years of age before I finally, had the wherewithal to be able to set that whole thing up. But, somebody got me a bootleg, VHS tape of it, and basically said, this is like the thing that's going around. You got to check this out. Watch it alone. And so it had a nice, setup. So, I blacked out all the windows in the living room, to watch this thing by myself. And I got to say, I really enjoyed what they were doing. I really thought this is very cool to make you feel, like you're seeing something that was real. And, no blood and all just suspense and I thought it was just great, and I couldn't wait to see it with a genre audience. And when it came out, I went to like one of the local, Cineplexes first day with the crowd, which again is the only way I want to see horror movies is, with the intended crowd on that first weekend, just to see, does it work? Are they getting what they want? And I was shocked that people were talking through it, they were texting, they were, it was just amazing. That's like, why is this not engaging them? What did they expect? I don't know, but it's somehow for that crowd, at least, and maybe there's other audiences that I've been at a different theater, because as I said before, audiences can be strange, it would have been, basically a disaster of a screening. But I went, no, I know what I saw, and I know there's something great. And, it kind of went on to basically find its audience. But a few weeks later was when I'd mentioned, that the Sixth Sense sneak preview happened. And that was the complete polar opposite in terms of an audience that was there with the movie. And, but it didn't have any hype. We didn't know what we were going to see, which had a lot to do with it too. Blair Witch, there was a huge expectation factor with the internet buzz and stuff. So I don't know if this particular crowd just, whoever were the alpha dogs in the crowd didn't connect, but it broke my heart that they were so disengaged, with the experience. And, it should have been really intense. And I saw just recently, what's the one that's got one word title. It's like a period movie, and the daughter's possessed. They're like Puritans.
The Witch.
The Witch, yeah. There again, I saw that at a like 11 o'clock show on a Friday night, and basically a Hispanic audience, and most of them seemed like they were friends and whatnot, and they were talking, and then at a certain point, everybody shut up. And I went, wow, they're listening to this dialogue that's very flowery, very unlike what they're used to listening to in movie dialogue. And, they really got engaged. And then there was a point where they sort of disengaged, and a couple got up and left. I went, okay, that's it. It's over. And then when the movie started to get more intense again, they were right there, right till the end again, and brought them all back in. So it was, it's just so amazing to me to watch the dynamics of a crowd, and especially with horror, because it's so key to try to keep them focused, keep them, there, through the whole experience.
Yeah, I'm always kind of wary of, I mean, the best experience you can have watching a horror movie is watching it with a packed crowd who's actually there to, if they're there for the movie. But if you even have one person who is, they're paying more attention to their cell phone, or they have that bright little screen lit up, or if they're chanting dumb things back at the screen, it can completely kill that tension. But I was actually lucky. I count myself now, especially in hindsight. I mean, this was the days before like rampant cell phone use when Blair Witch came out. It was back in, was it mid 99? But the audience that I saw it at, was at the local theater here, the one that I wound up working at. It was in the largest house, the 385 screen or seat theater rather. And it was entirely sold out, all 385 seats. I was sitting in the middle.
Wow.
The movie begins and people are like chatting and like super energetic during all of the previews. I think, all of that year's big horror previews were probably attached to it. Like, God, what would have been back then? Like Stigmata and, the Schwarzenegger movie, End of Days, and, trailers like that. The moment the movie begins and that white text goes up, in October of 1994, 3 student filmmakers went missing, all of that. From that point on until the end credits, silence. You could have heard a pin drop in a room full of people, not one word spoken, nothing of the sort. And at the very end, I'll never forget it, complete silence all the way through. You could feel that everybody was like super anxious and super intense. And it cuts to black after the camera hits the ground. And there's probably a beat of, what would you say, 3, 4, 5 seconds before you see that first credit come up, written, and directed by. Somebody to my right said, "Oh my God." And then the entire audience burst out laughing. And it was one of the greatest film going experiences I've ever had. And I'm so glad it was with that movie, because I love that original movie, and I can't wait to see what, Adam Wingard has done with the newest film. I'm very curious to see what that's going to be.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just glad
and the trailer looks great.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think I watched this interview with him on Bloody Disgusting, I think, where he noted, if the first movie was more alien, then he tried to make aliens. If the first film was about being lost in the woods, then the second movie is about just running away from an entity, or being chased by an entity through the woods. And it's like, okay, I'm on board with that. I'm just glad the franchise is back, because, looking at all the stuff that they came up with after that first movie, the little mini docs that played on Sci-Fi and then Showtime, and the little extra bits that were released. And then, the Blair Witch dossier, the book that ties into the movie as though it were real events. And then I think there were a couple of other books. Yeah. And, they had such a rich mythology built within that first 90-minute movie. And then, unfortunately, I mean, the one thing I can't defend the second movie from is, charges that it pretty much killed the franchise, because it did that. I mean, the first movie took in nearly $250 million worldwide.
Did it really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was like, it was 147 on a $35,000 budget, bought for $1 million by Artisan. It earned 147 million in the US and 249 million worldwide. And a year later, the franchise was dead, and has been for 16 years. That's just insane.
That is. Wow. Who's had the rights? All this? Artisan?
It was Lionsgate. Artisan, from what I was reading, it was kind of interesting. Apparently, Artisan was just this little company. They sort of got put on the map by Blair Witch, even though, I mean, they put up $1 million for Blair Witch, so they had to have had some money behind them even then. But Blair Witch came out. It was huge for them, and then they decided they wanted to build up the company as big as they could, as quickly as they could, so they could sell it off. And they thought Blair Witch 2 was going to do that for them. So even though Dan Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez told them they wanted to wait and not immediately sequelize it, and they had an idea for a prequel film about the witch, in the 1700s, Artisan wanted a movie out by the following Halloween, and we got Blair Witch 2. And it didn't tank. They made the movie for 15 million, and it made 47 or 48 worldwide. But it just it wasn't another monster like the first film was. So yeah. And then they wound up selling off to Lionsgate not long after that. And I guess Lionsgate has just been sitting on the rights all these years. That was the company that did horror in the mid-aughts too.
Yeah.
So you would have thought, of all places, Lionsgate would have found a way to resurrect that. And I mean, they did eventually. It it feels like it was 10, 12, 14 years too late. So
yeah, there's so much that goes on behind those closed doors about, whether we're going to do this, not do this, who's writing it. I don't think that draft is right. Let's put somebody else on it. I mean, and some of it just drags on, and then people get canned, and then the whole process stops. And, it's just amazing anything gets made. With the way the machinery just gets clogged up, just indecision and fear. And the thing that I've said repeatedly about this business is, the best answer for these people is no. Should we make this movie? No. Do you like the script? Nope. If you keep saying no, you will keep your job a lot longer than if you say yeah and that thing gets done and it doesn't work, you're out of a job. Who said yes to this? Joe. Okay. Get Joe off the clock. I mean, they're always looking for somebody to blame. Somebody has to be the guy that made the wrong decision so that they can justify, to whoever, the investors or whatever, why this happened. It wasn't me. It was, this guy said it was good. So what does that mean? It's like, well, let's get a proven title. I mean, who would have thought that people wouldn't show up for an Exorcist TV show? Come on, how much money that thing made. They're always looking for something, a star, from the producers of so and so. I mean, something that they can grab onto, that will help them justify why it's worth making this thing. And the public doesn't care. I mean, ultimately, it really is just a sales tool more than anything else. And people will say, who's in it? And it's like, oh, it's Nick Cage. It's like, oh, yeah, well, he was in that. Yeah, he's good. Well, Nick Cage is in debt up to his ass from bad, tax evasion and shit. So Nick's taking friggin' everything, he has been for years, that's why you see him in all this stuff. He's got stuff to pay off. And, Marlon Brando, when I met with him on a movie, basically he had an island and God knows how many wives that he was paying alimony to. So like, if you give me $1 million a week, I'll be there. And I mean, and that was it. That he just wanted the money and he'd go in and tell you how he was going to do it. And then just before it's going to happen, he'd back away, no, this is shit. I'm not going to do this. And it's funny how what really goes on is just crazy, and as I said, how anything ever gets done or is any good is a miracle,
Yeah, I mean, my God, watching that. Speaking of Brando, the documentary, is it Lost Souls? Maybe the making of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau. It's just kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I like Stanley's work a lot, but I mean, there's so little that he's made. There was that handful of documentaries, and then Dust Devil, which is fantastic, and Hardware, and then I think he did one little piece for the Theater Bazaar anthology a few years back. But watching that documentary and getting a sense of what his vision was going to be for that movie, I think that movie would have been really something. I think it could have been incredible. But and not that I actually kind of like the movie as it exists, the Frankenheimer version, but to hear all the tales about the making of the movie, it sounds like he was brought in to sort of guide a ship that had already set sail, under the studio's flag. And but I think it's a well-made movie. I think it's an interesting movie, but you could tell that Stanley was going to tell a very personal version of that story, and I think it would have been kind of fantastic to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'd see John at these blue ribbon committees with the DGA, when we were voting on TV movies and miniseries and stuff, and the first time I saw him, he would start talking about, that movie, and all he did was, I said, oh, so Brando must have been difficult. No, Val Kilmer, and he just went into all these horror stories about Val Kilmer and stuff. So when I was going to work with Brando, I went to every director that I could reach and say, can you tell me what the experience, was like? And of course, all of them said basically the same thing, which is, run, don't walk, do not do this. You think like, oh, we all did, you're going to have these great stories in the locker room to tell one day about, he said, but it's not worth it. He will destroy you. He hates directors, and even Brando said to me, other than, what's his name? Ila Kazan, who was the only one that could direct. Well, everybody else is bullshit. And, he literally would take directors on and find out stuff about them to put them down in front of everybody and things. And John, went back and I said, okay, you didn't have a problem with Brando. I never said that. I said that Val Kilmer was Brando was horrible, and then go into here all, But I've never seen that documentary. I'd love to see that.
Oh, it's excellent. I think it's on Blu-ray now. I caught it when it was on VOD. I think it was about a year ago. I have to imagine it's on home video by now. But yeah, if you get the chance to watch it, it's fascinating and heartbreaking, and it's one of my favorite film documentaries like that. And my favorite types are usually of the movies that could have been. I'm thinking about not just that, but Jodorowsky's Dune is another incredible one.
Oh yeah,
which,
yeah, that is great. I mean, my favorite for years has been Eleanor Coppola's Hearts of Darkness.
Oh my God, yeah.
This watching, and again back to Brando. You watch Francis go through hurricanes and heart attacks and all this shit, and it was Brando is the thing that gave him the mental breakdown because everything else you can kind of go, all right, what can we do? But when you sit there with another human being and trying to get them to change their mind about something, and the whole crew sitting around where they're up on a hill discussing, Colonel Kirk's, I mean, that's what drove him crazy, I could, having met Brando, I could see how that would be, especially if, he had something in his head that was just insane. And Francis is trying to save this movie of his that was so, monumental, and been so difficult up to then. Yeah, there's God, who's that actor who did or director that did American X?
Is it Tony Kaye, I think?
Yes. Good. He I guess did some Brando did some taught some acting classes. And I guess Tony shot these acting classes of Brando teaching actors. They exist somewhere. I don't know who's got the rights or what's gone on with it, but I've been dying to see that because that has got to be fucking incredible.
Yeah, my God. Imagine just stringing those together and releasing them as is. That would be amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Brando was, no question, a genius and a madman. I mean, following his train of thought, I was there with him like 3 hours, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And of course, I kept, sort of pinching myself going, I'm talking to the Godfather and Colonel Kirk's here, and this legend, and he's this, huge, powerful character that's part little boy, very mischievous, very smart, and can start to answer a question, veer off into 20 different subjects, and then come back and answer that question that you first asked. I mean, it was fascinating experience.
I have to ask, I had to digress too much, but you mentioned Silence of the Lambs winning Best Picture, and I love that movie, but it's amazing how many people insist that movie isn't a horror film. And I was wondering what your opinion on it was, because it almost seems like there's a certain type of audience member that wants to love that movie but not admit that they dearly love what is essentially a genre flick,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's that one's a little harder for me, at least, to label as a horror movie. It certainly has so many horrific elements to it, and there's certainly a great thriller aspect to it, and a very smart, dramatic battle of wits, between Jodie and Hopkins' character. That those scenes just played out, in just a frighteningly tense, suspenseful way. And I mean, Jonathan Demme hit so many great notes in that movie, and the fact that his style is that staring the other actors, looking at the other actor literally right off the matte box, so it looks like they're looking at you, when they cut back and forth. So it's that he makes you somehow confront these characters in his style, and working it into that particular kind of mix of genres, definitely, I see exactly how somebody could say, well, that really is horrific. I mean, that that scared me. And yet we're happy when he walks away at the end because we also loved him,
Sure.
because he was so damn entertaining. And that guy that, abused him, we were more than happy to see him, get killed. But, there was so much just good storytelling, and cinematically, and surprises, and, definitely putting somebody's skin over your face and stuff like that. You would not see that in anything other than a horror movie. So, it's very hard to say it doesn't fall into that, or those aren't the things that you remember more than anything else. But for me, that movie, again, gets back to, two characters that are just unforgettable. And, there's just no getting around that what Hannibal was as a iconic, villain is something that, everybody imitates, in some way. Get that Hannibal, that stare, get that cold, get that, get that Lecter kind of thing going. It just is something that's a quality that, actors talk about all the time, or writers say, yeah, it's got to be like a Hannibal Lecter kind of guy. It's an amazing creation.
So you would say you're definitely more interested in just staying sort of in the feature realm at the moment?
Pretty much. I mean, in the thing I'm really interested in is virtual reality. I've been keeping track of that over the last couple of years and watching some of the, incredible things, especially in horror, that can be done. That is, taking us one more step into something that is so much more experiential, than just, watching a movie, to be able to trigger somebody to look to the left or right because of a sound effect, and then you turn and suddenly there's something in your face, or you see something that gives you a bit of information that you keep going. And the whole notion that, we're going to have to change the very art of filmmaking, that forget close-ups and two shots and over the shoulder and all that. Everything is basically, that voyeuristic, one camera following, and things that make you feel like you are, like you would in a game. You may choose to go through a door and you're going to get one movie or experience going that way. And the next time you do it, you can go through another door or turn around and go upstairs, or, there's so many different variations that could happen. And there's just so many things to explore in terms of what will affect you emotionally. I've had some of those things on where they do like a camera crane up, and you just feel your whole body going, like up in the air, like it takes your breath away, and for some people it, gets them physically nauseated. Other people, it doesn't bother them at all. And luckily I'm in that camp. But I just went, wow. I mean, you were not going anywhere, but it just felt like I just rose up, into the clouds or over the mountain, or, wherever the filmmaker wanted to take me. But it really doesn't work to cut, and go from thing to thing. It jars you in a way that takes you out of the experience of a voyeur following somebody or standing back and watching it. And the more movies that we've seen of recent that have the Steadicam shots that do the entire scene, I mean, that's really preparing us for that way of seeing a movie, purely by somebody that keeps wrapping around, and you stage it in a way that it's really entertaining and unique, and you are there, part of the experience, but not seen, which I think there's a lot to be mined out of that, in fact, with all the genres, whether it's comedy or horror or suspense.
Now, do you see virtual reality working as a theatrical experience, or do you think that would only have to be a sort of home entertainment thing?
Well, we talked about that, the DGA, was it last year? I think it was, when there was a big virtual reality seminar, and there was a lot of arguing, the old guard. It's like, oh, wait a minute, people are all going to sit with the thing on their head, and, you're sitting next to somebody, but, and they go, you're still going to feel each other, in the room. There is an experience that's sort of to be had there. A lot of rides are doing that now. You go on, Star Tours, and you're given 3D glasses, or some of the other rides at Universal. So already, they're sort of setting up for that. You wearing something so you can see the effects, and you're less aware of the people around you, but you feel them. But the thing that they brought up, which I thought was really interesting, is that, I don't know how long it's going to take for things to go feature length. It may be 20 minutes, or it's almost like the way movies started with the Nickelodeon. So you put a penny in or a dime in, and you crank this thing, and that's the movie. And then they, become shorts, and then eventually a little longer, and then eventually, obviously D.W. Griffith got credited with, Birth of a Nation being like the first big theatrical feature, but I'm sure other countries, were doing the same thing at the same time, and that he was ours. That eventually we'll find some way to evolve this into, more spectacular. But what they were pointing out was that if we're doing these things in like half-hour things, and it's more like a ride experience thing that, you watch this, and then when it's over and you take this thing off, you turn to the person you're with and it's like, can you believe that? No. Did you go through that door? No, what door? The one that's like, oh shit, I got to do this again. It's like, I'm telling you, dude, you got to do it. You got to do this. You're not going to believe what happened. Yeah, but did you go out there? I did. Was that not incredible? So you'd be sharing afterwards what you saw, and did you do this? Did you do that? Which is, again, very different experience. It's not what we're used to. And I don't know. I mean, it's sort of exciting to me because it's like, it's like when somebody tells you got to go see a movie, and that's the reason you go see the movie. Like I said, why I went to see The Exorcist, it always gets back to that. Somebody says to you, you know me, I hate everything. You got to see this, and it's like, okay, I'm in. So if you're able to do that, after an experience that's a virtual reality thing, and you feel everybody buzzing, I think the want to see it again would be pretty strong. And that's really where the money is ultimately in a business. It's like not the first time you see something. It's, do you go back again? Do you recommend other people to go back? You got to see this, which is why there's always, huge lines at the amusement parks for the rides that are the super cool rides. They'll stand in the sun for 2 hours to go on this 4-minute ride because they heard it's really great. And we're kind of borrowing from, I think, that when we start to get into the virtual reality thing. And then if the seats buzz or move or, mist goes into your face or some of the other things that, they're doing now to make it much more experiential, it's somewhere in all that. And who knows, where it will land, and then how fast technology goes and digital, things will just keep evolving, faster than we can keep up with it. But I find that all very exciting because I think, especially for a young creative person that wants to do something new, there's so many great choices of things that you can explore and, give us something that once again will scare us like The Exorcist did, or, make us feel warm and wonderful like E.T. did in its day, and, and go down the line with things. I just saw the Jason Bourne movie, and there's a chase down Las Vegas Boulevard, and you go, all right, they didn't really do everything that you see them doing, but it was so well executed, so top of the line, everything with the crashes, with the CGI that they did do, with the stunts, with the cutting, everything that you go, I wanted to believe that was real because it was just so well done, and it was an insane idea, like having to chase through Times Square. It's like, how the hell can you do that? And, Las Vegas Boulevard is just like that, bumper to bumper traffic all the time. How the hell did they do a high speed chase and go over cars and go over stuff and go into the casino? And I loved it. The guys in the band that went with me to see it were going, oh yeah, it was a cool popcorn movie. And I go, it was a cool popcorn. I go, yeah, all right, it was, but can you not admit that was friggin' amazing? I mean, that's just the guys that they pulled off that. To me, I was in awe because it's something that I never saw before. And, I'm sure people have talked about, wouldn't that be great if we could do that? And well, they did it. They had the money and the wherewithal to pull off something that spectacular.
I got to say, just because of the nature of this conversation, I now really, really want to see a virtual reality version of an exorcism. Either standing in the room as the two priests do their thing. Maybe you could be the person possessed. Maybe you could be the person actually performing the exorcism. But I think it could be pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, I saw this one thing called, I think the name was Catatonic, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's like a 8-minute, maybe short little horror movie. And the way they had it set up, which was great at the Directors Guild Theater, is they had two old school nurses in old school nurses outfits standing, holding wheelchairs. And, we all had to line up and wait our turn. And, and you got to watch people going through it, which was also fun. It's just standing there and watching people freak out and their arms jump and all this stuff. And basically what it was is, you sit in this thing and they put the virtual reality thing on your head and your ears and things. And then you hold on to the wheelchair. And, when the thing starts, it's like you're watching from the point of view of sitting in a wheelchair, and you can look down and see the hands. You can turn around and see the nurse behind you in the shadows, the way they shot the thing. And it was like in a insane asylum. So basically all it was is traveling down these halls, downstairs, through doors, all this stuff. And, these crazy, insane characters would suddenly just spring into your face, or you see them all the way at the end. And so now you're heading towards them. And then suddenly one would come out from the right, and just, scare the hell out of you. And, and then you'd come to a room and, and the wheelchair would bang up against the door trying to get in. And then, you'd feel this pull back and go through it. I mean, it just really was this, like a fun house, except, it was all virtual reality. And and it was a lot of fun. And watching the people react to this thing, was a hoot. I mean, you could hardly wait to go through it, just watching everybody else do it. But as I said, 8 minutes really wasn't a story, but it certainly was, a fun ride.
I'm sold. I can't wait until somebody harnesses that and, brings it into the feature realm. I think it could be pretty amazing. Are you actually on tour at any point with the Sloths, or are there plans for upcoming tours?
Yeah, actually, we just are, finishing up some. It's right now. It's just basically West Coast and Northwest and Vancouver and San Diego. Sort of like San Diego. I think we're going to Phoenix, Arizona, New Mexico area. But yeah, we keep trying to get to the East Coast. I mean, we got as far as New Orleans, and then we went and did Spain for a Purple Weekend, which was a garage rock festival that they did that they had us over in Spain for. But I really want to get on the East Coast and, Middle America. And the music that we're doing that's on the album and stuff is very, classic 60s rock and roll, exactly the stuff that, we were into at that time. And, there's a fan base that, loves that early garage rock, of which, we were a garage band solely because our parents wouldn't let us play in the house. We had to play in the garage. And, at that time it was looked upon as, boy, you guys are really, losers. You can't even rent a studio to practice in. It's like, yeah, well, we're a garage band. Now it's kind of a cool term, meaning, things are rough and edgy and, not always in tune. And, what eventually, the Ramones got down to a fine art, is what we were all sort of playing with, in the mid 60s and calling it rebel rock instead of punk. It was our way of kind of going, all right, we're going to take what we've learned from the Stones and all those great English groups and what they had learned from the great blues and rhythm and blues artists of America and kind of make it our own teenage angst and, always about girls and getting out of school and rock and roll.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you so much. It was really a joy, talking with you.